Now, amid the politics is a real threat to a real forest that literally holds the future of Kenya.
The Mau complex, which straddles 5 counties, is the lifeline of Kericho, Bomet, Narok and Nakuru towns.
Now, if the Mau complex disappears, experts say so would the Mau Serengeti ecosystem that is kept alive by the Mara River, which emanates from the forest.
The tea industry in Kericho and Bomet counties would collapse if the Mau disappeared, and there would be no wheat or potato farms in Narok.
Well, the Nakuru National Park too would all but die if the Mau ceased to exist.
And finally, pastoralists in Narok would have no choice but to migrate to other areas, resulting in a series of conflicts perhaps never witnessed before in this country.
Well, to get further perspective on this and life and death issue, Citizen TV's Joe Ageo, who has followed the Mau conflict for over a decade and a half, now speaks to an environmental expert on just what is at stake. Joe.
Yes, indeed, Victoria, a lot at stake. The Mau is a big deal, even literally, by the way, 467,000 hectares. That is 7 times the size of Nairobi County or Nairobi and Kirinyaga put together. So very, very, very important. And it has international implications as well, because from that same forest complex is where we get key rivers, one of them leading to Natron, Lake Natron in Tanzania, which is the breeding ground for the lesser flamingo, very important. And of course, it also is a source of several rivers going into Lake Victoria that then become one of the sources of the River Nile. So very interesting with international implications. But to get further perspectives, we are going to be speaking right now to Benson Ochieng. He's the Executive Director of the Institute of Law and Environmental Governance, also someone who has followed the Mau issue very, very seriously from an environmental as well as legal perspective. Benson, one of the interesting things that I cannot get over is the fact that this is a conservation issue, but we don't seem to get to the conservation conversation. There's too much politics and all these other issues. Why can't we just have the conversation about Mau as an ecological question?
Well, thanks for having me, Joe. Clearly, Mau is a big problem in this country. And the nature of the subject itself is the one that makes it be more political than economic and ecological, as it should be. And it just seems that we have our priorities wrong. We don't seem to get it right when we are faced with major, serious issues like the Mau. We need to remove politics from it and really look at the issues and find a solution to this important problem.
But Benson, for as long as I've covered this thing, all the way from 2001, when there was this Gazette notice to excise more than 67,000 hectares from the Mau, and there was a great controversy. The question that I keep asking, is anybody ever allowed to live in a forest, and under what circumstances?
Well, we are balancing very important things. There are what we call traditional rights of use of any resource. And in the case of Mau, the one that comes to fore is the right of some communities, especially the Ogiek community, to live in the forest. But the question we must ask ourselves is whether it is sustainable to dream or hope that in the times of today there is any community in Kenya that can live in the forest and align its activities with the sustainability required of a forest. And so if you look at the case that was there in 2001, when there was notice to excise large portions of the Mau forest, the Ogiek were saying this is our traditional homeland. The Constitution is clear that we will pursue sustainability, we will manage our affairs as a country in a manner that respects traditional rights of communities and ensure that they can also eke out their traditional ways of livelihood from the forest. But clearly, as the judge did say in that particular case, the Ogiek of today is not the Ogiek of yore, of the 1940s. And it is very wrong, or it is sort of a dream to imagine that they can sustainably live in the forest and still manage to save the Mau. I think Mau is a case where we squarely must just bite the bullet and say, yeah, at a certain time you have to lose your life to save your life.
But finally, Benson, as we wrap up this, there is the question of how to get the people out of the forest, because I have seen every time, whether it is 2007, 2009, the question that we are dealing with right now, that, oh, we were never given notice, the eviction is inhumane, and all of these things. What is the legal threshold? How is this thing supposed to be conducted?
Well, there is always the question of standard human procedures for evictions. And this, first of all, requires consultation, and it also requires a very elaborate engagement of the people involved. But even as you talk about evictions, you have to have a plan and a way by which you are going to ensure that you carry out the activity that in a way that does not really undermine the human rights of these people. And that is where we are missing the point. You see, a lot of people who talk about the Mau talk about keeping these communities in the Mau, and I think that is where we have just to make a clear departure and say we are not going to save the Mau unless these people come out. How we get them out should be in a humane way. There are procedures for doing that, and that is where the conversation needs to go. Where do we take them? Can they have alternative land? Can we resettle them? And can we then ensure that we have measures in place and plans to bring Mau back to its integrity?
Thank you very much. Benson Ochieng, Executive Director of the Institute of Law and Environmental Governance, speaking to us about the Mau, the conversation about the conservation that has become very, very political indeed. Thank you very much, Benson. Over to you, Jeff and Victoria.